Greetings, my dear viewers. Welcome back to Dungeons and Dragons Character Concepts. I am Drehan, and today we are going over the elven race. This has got to be one of the most diverse races I have ever had the pleasure of going over. Not to mention how complicated their lore is. You've got all these different elf sub-races and different elven gods and how they interacted with each other. It's insane. To show you how insane this is, let's go ahead and go over the different sub-races of elves. You have the Wood Elves, the High Elves, Eladrin, Drow, which are also known as Dark Elves, Sea Elf, the Shadar Kai, the Pallid Elf, Mark of Shadow Elf from Eberron. You've got the Avariel, Grugach Elf, both from Unearthed Arcana, the Bishtarha and the Tirihar elves from Kaladesh, and also the Vahadar elf from Kaladesh as well. Then you got the three different Zendikar elf sub-races, which are from the three different nations. The Tajuru elf, the Juraga elf, and the Muldea nations. I do apologize if I have butchered any of those pronunciations. Now, with such a diverse sub-race selection, you'd think this would be a decently long video, and honestly, I tried to cover the best I could with so many sub-races, and also tried to condense it. So I might not go over certain sub-races, and if I don't, I do apologize. I probably even missed one or two. In fact, I do believe I forgot to add the Artificer for the two Kaladesh elves. Oh well. Anyway, we're going to start things off like we always do, and start off with the backgrounds. And just as diverse as the sub-races are, we have a diverse selection of backgrounds. So you can have a very long list of elf characters just by using sub-races and backgrounds. We have the Acolyte, the Noble, the Outlander, the Far Traveler, the Courter, City Watch, Charlatans, Entertainers, the Grinders, Mercenary Veterans, Urban Bounty Hunters, Soldiers, Spies, Viziers, Fishers, and Plaintiffs. That is very, very diverse. And that is only scratching the surface. Right now I can tell you one of the best combinations thus far, in my opinion, would be a Shadar Kai with the Mercenary Veteran background, or maybe even the Urban Bounty Hunter. That's even better. I like that one. The Urban Bounty Hunter Shadar Kai. That's because that's how they operate. The Shadar Kai go after people of interest that are of interest to the Raven Queen. You see how great the lore of the elves are. It's just mind-boggling. And that's not even getting into the classes. The best classes for the elves is just about everything. Rangers, druids, bards, clerics, fighters, rogues, even wizards. Everything fits, and that's not going into detail. about which subclasses fit the elven race. So let's go ahead and dive in to this rabbit hole. Also, a note, you can also diverse your subraces by what gods they worship. For example, Lolth and Illustrae for the Drow. Illustrae being the only good goddess of the Drow. Alright, now that I've said my piece, let's go ahead and get into it. Starting off with the Ranger class. This is where things get a little complicated. I planned on scrunching this down to where I put multiple subraces in the same category, but with how each race is so different, I had to separate them into their own categories. For example, the Drow would best fit the Gloomstalker and the Swarmkeeper conclaves, while the Grugach best fit in Fey Wanderer and Swarmkeeper. And the Swarmkeeper also fit the Wood Elf, while Gloomstalker fit with the Shadar-kai as well as the Drow. And the Eldrin also fit with a Fey Wanderer, much like the Grugach. But other conclaves really didn't fit with just one subrace, so you could technically go with a Hunter, Monster Slayer, or Beastmaster Ranger for just about any elf subrace. The Druid is going to be our next one, and this one was actually a little bit easier, but not entirely. For the Pallid Elves, it makes the most sense to go with the Circle of the Moon, since, well, that's how they were created. They were created during a moon. I believe a full moon. For the Drow, the Circle of Spores makes the most sense, and if you were to follow Illustrae, the moon is also a very good choice. For the Shadar-kai, Twilight is going to be your circle because of your connection to the Shadowfell and its forever twilight state. Now for the Eldrin, that's a little bit more complicated. The Circle of the Land is going to be your main subclass. However, since the Eldrin also come in 4 different types, you're going to need to figure out which subtype of land druid you would be. For example, the Arctic and Mountain Circle of the Land archetype is going to be best fitting for a Winter Eldrin, while the Wildfire... that's a different one. For your forest and grasslands would best fit the spring, summer, and autumn. But if you wanted to go with the Summer Eldrin as well, you could also go with the Wildfire Druid, just because of how that sub-race is, the sub-race operates. Now, the Sea Elves would go best with the land as well, but they fit more into the coast. And also a Moon Druid would probably fit well with the Sea Elves just because of how the moon affects the tides. Moving on to Cleric, this is where some things get a little bit tricky. I went ahead and listed the different gods for the Drow just so you have a good idea of what each one is. We have Trickery, Beauty, War, and Death for the Drow. And for the Shadar-kai, they only serve the Raven Queen, which could fall under Death, the Grave, and Twilight domains. While any elf could be in the domains of life, nature, peace, or beauty. It just depends on which one of the elven gods you wish to have your character serve, which is still very diverse, mind you. Moving on to fighter, the martial archetypes, I would say best served with a cavalier or an arcane archer. And fun fact, the arcane archer martial archetype was actually created by the elves, but is not exclusive to elves. So, it makes perfect sense for an elf to be a fighter, especially an arcane archer. Moving on to the bard, for the drow and the mark of shadow, the colleges of whispers and blades would be the most fitting, while all elves would fit into the categories of creation, lore, and valor. That's just because of how they operate. They love to sing about their history, about themselves. Moving on to the wizard class. Now, let's go ahead and start off with the school known as the Blade Singer. Now, this class, much like the Arcane Archer, was created by elves, but is not exclusive to just elves. So you can have anyone pick this class, but it was created by elves, so having an elf Blade Singer makes sense. Now that I mention it, an interesting multi-class would be the Fighter Arcane Archer and the Wizard Blade Singer. Two subclasses that were created by the elves being used on an elf character. Probably Wood Elf. Yeah, Wood Elf, that would work. Anyway, continuing on, Pallid Elves make most sense with using Graviturgy, since that is, well, gravity. For Drow, Necromancy, Conjuration, Enchantment, and War Magic make the most sense. I even had to look this up to make sure I got it right, since there are a lot of Drow wizards, but they never specify on which school they use. Now, for Wood Elves and the Grugyach Elf, I would recommend Transmutation. Moving on to Rogue, it makes the most sense for the Shadar-kai to be using the Phantom archetype, just because of how close they are with the Realm of Shadow. They are close to the spirits of the dead. For Drow, the Soul Knife and the Assassin make the most sense. Soul Knife because of their relationship with the Illithids. I would assume that being so close to Mind Flayers would actually have some sort of effect on them. So a Soul Knife would actually make sense. But as always, there are archetypes that would fit with any elf that you would like to make. The Scout, the Swashbuckler, and the Arcane Trickster come to mind. Moving on to Monk, once again, the Shadar-kai and the Drow actually have a shared monastic tradition. Well, and of course, Mark of Shadow. The Shadow monastic tradition, Monk best fits with these subraces, but the Shadar-kai would also best fit a Long Death monastic tradition. For the Eladrin, the monastic tradition of the four elements makes the most sense with them, since they are able to change between the seasons, thus being able to gain abilities based off of the four elements. For Warlock, you have a very diverse selection as well. For the Eladrin and Grugax, for example, they have connection to the Feywild and even their homeland. So the Archfey would actually make the most sense. For Drow, their ties to Lolth and even the Illithids would best serve them for the Fiend and Great Old One patrons. The Shadar Kai's tie to the Raven Queen actually has their ties in the Hexblade patron. The Sea Elves would have a patron in either the Fathomless or the Genie. Merid Genie, to be more precise. And the Avariel, which we haven't talked about just yet, these are the Winged Elves, and they actually come from the plane of elemental air. Well, supposedly. That's where a lot of them are said to be, but there have also been a lot on the material plane, but it's still kind of rare since the dragons kind of killed a good portion of them. But because of their ties to the elemental plane of air, it would make sense that their patron would be a genie. More specifically, a Jinn, the air genies. Now, Sorcerer is going to be the next one on our list, and once again, tying back to the Illithids, Drow would probably have the best fitting as an aberrant mind sorcerer or even a shadow sorcerer. For the Sea Elves, the Unearthed Arcana Sea Origin and a Storm Origin best fit. For the Eladrin, I would recommend Pyromancy. And fun fact, the Pyromancy comes from Plane Shift Kaladesh, and it states in there that you can actually reflavor the Pyromancy sorcerer to fit whatever type of magic you wish. The example they give is the Cryomancer, switching out fire damage for cold damage, which would fit both the Summer Eladrin and Winter Eladrin respectively. The Avariel would have their origins with the Storm, again fitting into the elemental plane of air, and most of them being in high up mountainous regions. Now, as for all the other elves, and even the selection that I just went over, wild magic sorcerers would actually make sense. Okay, I think that's going to have to do it for today. I probably went over my time as is. Now, just a quick note, I actually learned this from another YouTuber, and I think it would be interesting for dungeon masters to learn about, but elves go through reincarnation in their religion. There is only a select number of elven souls, and their main god would cycle through and have them reincarnated. However, it is said that there will be times where their gods will produce a more elven souls. In turn, create more elves. It is said that these elven baby booms are an ill omen. If there are more elves than there should be, that means something terrible is coming. And I think this would be perfect for an elven character. It would be the perfect backstory. Your character is a sign of an ill omen, and you are tasked with trying to figure out what is about to happen. I love it. It's just amazing. I love the lore of the elves, even though it's not my favorite race. Anyway, that's all the time I have for today. Until next time, my dear viewers, this has been Drehan, and I am offline.